four corners of the earth and the far corridors of history. Dateline, World War II. May 1942, a Japanese invasion force puts to sea. Its target, New Guinea. The task force is made up of 11 Army troop transports screened by aircraft carriers, destroyers, and heavy cruisers. New Guinea is key to the Japanese plan to invade Australia. It is a short hop across calm water from the island to Cape York Peninsula in Queensland, and the Imperial plan is to have troops on Australian soil by summer. As the Japanese Armada sets out, they don't realize that the United States knows they're coming. Just after the outbreak of war, American cryptologists deciphered the most secret of Japanese secret codes. Since then, Japan's most privileged radio transmissions have been theirs for the taking. Floating between the Japanese task force and New Guinea are the ships of Admiral Chester Nimitz's Pacific Fleet. Nimitz and Admiral Bull Halsey believe that an air attack against the task force can stop the Japanese invasion before it begins. Nimitz distrusts the Army Air Force pilots and chooses instead to let the veteran pilots of the aircraft carriers Lexington and Yorktown carry the battle. Thus is a plan hatched for a completely new kind of battle, one in which great navies meet not with guns but with planes, attacking each other from far over the horizon. As the Japanese fleet sails onward, oblivious to the pending attack, a weather front swoops across the Coral Sea, befogging thousands of square miles of ocean. The heavy weather works in the favor of the ambushing American fleet, who conceal themselves until they are within 20 miles of the Japanese. Just before dawn on the morning of 6 May, the Yorktown launches Wildcats and Devastator torpedo bombers at the approaching Japanese Navy. Dive bombers pitch 1,000-pound high explosives at the enemy, damaging the destroyer Kirizuki so badly that its captain runs it aground so that it will not swamp. 3 minesweepers sink as the American planes return to their home carrier. On 7 May, aircraft from the Lexington track down the Shoho, the smallest of several Japanese carriers in the area. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch launches an attack that catches the Japanese admiral with only 7 of his planes airborne. The Japanese turn their carrier into the wind to launch more fighters, just as the American torpedo bombers approach. The Shoho, steaming straight and steady so that its planes can take off, makes a fat target. 60 dive bombers and 24 torpedo planes finish the ship in less than 10 minutes. Attacks on the larger Japanese carriers, Zuikaku and Shokaku, are less successful. The Zuikaku hides in the dark of a rainstorm. The Shokaku is not so lucky. American planes drop 3 bombs on her deck, ending her ability to mount flight operations, but she steams away before a death blow can be dealt. The Japanese, while certainly getting the worst of the first day's conflict, were not without victories of their own. Japanese aircraft sink the American tanker Neosho of the cruiser Sims and damage several other craft. The next day, 8 May, dawns clear and bright. Aircraft from the Zuikaku corner the Lexington in a crossfire of bombs and torpedoes, striking both sides of the ship. As the captain orders a hard about to avoid one flight of incoming torpedoes, he turns directly into the path of another. Bombs from above explode in the ship's smokestack and in an ammunition magazine. In 19 minutes, the attack is over. The Lexington is listing 6 degrees to port. After several hours of heroic damage control, the order is given to abandon ship. 5 torpedoes from the American destroyer Phelps send the carrier once and for all to the bottom. The Yorktown, attacked at the same time, fares better. It absorbs several hard blows but continues to fight. By mid-afternoon, conscious of dwindling supplies, Bull Halsey gives the order for the American fleet to pull out of the Coral Sea. Unbeknownst to Halsey, the Japanese force is receiving much the same message from its handlers. By sundown, the battle is broken off. The Japanese invasion force and the American defenders retreat. The toll taken has been heavy. The Japanese have lost 1 carrier, 2 destroyers, 3 cargo ships, 4 gunboats, and a handful of small vessels sunk. 2 other carriers, a cruiser, and a destroyer sufficiently damaged that they must return to port for repairs. American losses are 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, and 1 tanker. The most important casualty, however, is the Japanese dream of conquering Australia. The invasion force never makes it to New Guinea, and without New Guinea, there will be no Imperial troops coming ashore in Queensland. The Japanese dream of conquering the entire Western Pacific has ended. May 1942, England, under the command of Air Marshal Arthur Harris, over 1,000 Royal Air Force bombers take to the air, embarking upon Operation Millennium, the objective of which is the destruction of the city of Cologne. While the purpose of the mission is to disrupt the manufacture of war materials, what may prove even more important is the steel this action will add to the will of the English people. Since the war began, the citizens of Britain have played an historic, if unenviable, role. They have been on the receiving end of a lesson in the importance of aircraft in modern warfare. As the victims of a seemingly endless series of air raids, their nights have become a hell of raging fires, destruction, and death. As the Nazis have endeavored to dominate the world, they have depended heavily on air power. Under the leadership of Hermann Goering, the ruthless and visionary head of the Luftwaffe, incessant airstrikes have pounded Hitler's adversaries into helplessness. Time and again, they have destroyed cities, blown up bridges, highways, and rail lines, and perhaps most importantly, broken the will of the European peoples to resist. The psychological impact of aerial assault cannot be overestimated. Around the world, people depend upon their country's military, first and foremost, to protect them from harm. But how can any military be reasonably expected to protect against attack from the air when only 1 plane need reach its target in order to deliver a devastating blow? This is the lesson that the people of England have been forced to learn. But now, as her citizens ship their children to safe haven in the north and stiffen their upper lips, the Royal Air Force is preparing a reply. As much as the Germans want the war in Europe to be a battle of advanced military techniques, the British are about to turn it into a battle of a nation's will and a people's determination. On the evening of 30 May, the 1,046 planes of Millennium set out for Germany in an airborne caravan 70 miles long. Early the following morning, the citizens of Cologne awaken to the sounds of war as thousands of bombs explode and set their city ablaze. The anti-aircraft guns on the ground remain unused for fear of shooting down Luftwaffe defenders who never arrive. By morning, over 250 factories are in ruins, 45,000 Germans are homeless, and all but 40 of the British planes are safely home. As devastating a blow as the bombs deliver, even more disturbing to the German high command are the weapons dropped by the last airplanes to fly over Cologne. Thousands of leaflets drift down from the sky to the smoldering city below. Addressed to the people of Germany, they state simply, "The offensive of the RAF in its new form has begun." And so, it seems, as the battle of a nation's will and a people's determination. 3 June 1942, Dutch Harbor. In an operation that is a diversion for another operation, which is itself a diversion, 13 carrier-launched Japanese fighter bombers begin an attack on the naval base here on the island of Unalaska. The purpose of this attack is to draw attention away from the planned invasion of the 2 most westerly islands in the Aleutian chain, Attu and Kiska. For the Americans, based on these godforsaken slabs of rock and muskeg, the actual attack is less of a surprise than the fact that anyone would want to invade these islands in the first place. Situated off the coast of Alaska between the North Pacific and the Bering Sea, They are cold, desolate, depressing atolls of misery, barely suited for occupation by human beings. Nevertheless, they are U.S. territory and, despite the consistently inclement weather, are considered by both sides a possible staging area for attack. So the military has stationed men here to protect them. The raid on Dutch Harbor is over quickly with minimal losses on both sides, and on 5 June, the Japanese land troops on Attu and 2 days later overrun Kiska. In both cases, because the American commander had assumed the Japanese objective was the coast of Alaska, the invasions are unopposed. While the location of the landings is something of a surprise, the fact that the Japanese were going to stage an attack on the Aleutians is no surprise at all. In fact, the Americans have known for weeks that the Imperial Navy was coming, having intercepted and decoded radio messages to that effect. They also know that the attack here is only an attempt to draw the bulk of the U.S. Pacific Fleet away from the real Japanese objective, Midway. So while the military leaders on both sides realize that the invasion of the Aleutians was merely a feint and that they are of little strategic or tactical importance, the government and people of the United States are outraged and demanding reprisal. Unaware or uncaring of the fact that who maintains control of these barren rocks will likely have little impact on the outcome of the war, Americans can see only one aspect of the Japanese victory here. That, for the first time in a very long time, a foreign invader is occupying U.S. soil. May 1942, Tokyo. Japanese Imperial Headquarters issues an order instructing a combined fleet under the command of Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo to invade and occupy strategic islands in the western Aleutians and Midway Island in the central Pacific. The plan, devised by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the attack on Pearl Harbor, is an attempt to lure what is left of the U.S. Pacific Fleet into a final, decisive battle. Midway Island, a tiny atoll 1,100 miles northwest of Hawaii, is the United States' westernmost outpost. It would provide the Japanese with an advanced base for operations against not only Hawaii, but also the West Coast. After the destruction of the U.S. fleet and the taking of the islands, Yamamoto, who fears Japan will lose a protracted war, feels certain that the United States will quickly sue for peace. The Japanese are confident of victory, and not without good reason. The fleet under Nagumo's command is enormous, including 10 battleships and 4 aircraft carriers. The Americans have no battleships and only 2 carriers, neither of which Yamamoto believes is anywhere near Midway. The Japanese belief in the lack of American naval power in the region is no accident. It is, in fact, exactly what Admiral Chester Nimitz wants them to believe. Nimitz is betting everything on the as-yet untested intelligence obtained by breaking the Japanese code, which indicates that Midway, not the Aleutians, is Yamamoto's primary objective. American intelligence has also misled the Japanese into believing that the USS Yorktown was sunk at the Battle of Coral Sea. Although she is far from tip-top shape, the Yorktown, after receiving emergency repairs at Pearl Harbor, is considered battle-worthy. On 2 June, with the Japanese fleet making for Midway, 2 American task forces under the command of Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance sit in radio silence 325 miles north of Midway. With only 3 carriers, the Enterprise, Yorktown, and Hornet, Spruance knows that if the U.S. Pacific Fleet is to survive the coming battle, he must achieve complete surprise, taking out the Japanese flat tops before they have an opportunity to effectively strike at his carriers. It is a tremendous gamble. If it pays off, it would be a devastating setback for the Japanese and perhaps a turning point in the war. If it fails, however, the Americans' ability to contest the Japanese in the Pacific will be virtually destroyed, leaving the west coast of America staring into a rising sun. As the Germany of the 1930s has gone from being a financially destitute and politically disoriented republic to the dominant force in Europe and perhaps the world, the focal point of that rebirth has undoubtedly been Adolf Hitler. Yet, as with all leaders, he has not arrived, nor does he dwell at his pinnacle alone. Surrounding him are a group of men who, it might be argued, have had as much to do with the rise of Nazism and the transformation of Germany as Hitler himself. Principal among those who can claim credit for Hitler's ascent as leader of the German people is Joseph Goebbels. Functioning as the Nazis' minister of propaganda since 1933, he is the man who crafted the Nazi leader's image, who sold Hitler to the public, not just as a political chieftain, but as savior of the nation. After graduating with a degree in philosophy, a young Goebbels failed in a number of attempts to become a novelist or writer, turning instead to the world of politics, where he soon discovered and became fascinated by Hitler and the Nazis. By 1930, he was the party's propaganda chief, coordinating and conducting a series of election campaigns which led ultimately to Hitler's rise to chancellor. In 1933, Goebbels was appointed head of the newly formed Reich Ministry of Information and Propaganda. Hampered by an unimpressive physical presence and a club foot, Goebbels is nevertheless a brilliant speaker and tireless salesman for the policies of the Reich. A masterful liar, Goebbels is a victim of his own propaganda. He idolizes Adolf Hitler and is the man responsible for bestowing on him the title of Führer and for instituting the now compulsory greeting of Heil Hitler. While Goebbels may be Hitler's most fervent supporter, it is Hermann Goering who is his most trusted subordinate. Recalling their early years together, Hitler said of Goering that he was ice cold in time of crisis. It is perhaps for this reason that Hitler has designated him as his successor. After serving in the military during World War I, Goering joined the Nazis in 1921 and was appointed Hitler's bodyguard. Shot in the groin during the beer hall putsch of 1923, he became addicted to morphine as a result of the painful wound, and has remained so on and off through the years. After Hitler was appointed chancellor in 1933, Goering became president of Prussia, where he established two institutions which were to become mainstays of the regime. He opened the first concentration camps, used at the time to detain opponents of the party, and established the state secret police, which soon became known by its acronym, Gestapo. Despite his addiction and the resulting decline in mental stability, Goering has played a major role in many of the Nazis' greatest triumphs. In addition to his responsibilities in Prussia, in 1933, Goering was appointed Minister of Aviation and, in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, began a massive buildup of German air power. By 1939, Goering's Luftwaffe was the most powerful air force in the world and became the foundation on which Blitzkrieg was built. In 1940, when Polish leaders in Warsaw rejected demands for surrender, Goering bombed them into submission. Similar attacks led to the victories in Norway and France. It was these triumphs which compelled Hitler to create and appoint Goering to the position of Reichsführer, officially making the corpulent morphine addict the number 2 man in the Nazi party. Despite his power within the walls of the Chancellery, Goering is not considered by the citizens of Germany to be the most powerful man in the country. That distinction goes to the bespectacled former chicken farmer whose gift for terror and penchant for persecution propelled him to the upper echelons of the party and made him the most feared man in the Reich, Heinrich Himmler. Himmler's base of power is the Schutzstaffel, commonly known as the SS. He has, through deceit, murder, betrayal, and brute force, transformed what was a minor police force into the most powerful and efficient terrorist organization the world has ever known. By way of the SS, Himmler controls the Gestapo, which he commandeered from Goering in 1936, the Waffen-SS, an independent military force intended to challenge the authority of the Wehrmacht, and the entire system of Nazi concentration camps, the vehicle by which he intends to implement the final solution. There are others, past and present, who have contributed to the Nazis' eminence. The names of Bormann, Ribbentrop, Speer, and Hess will all find a place in the annals of history as men who helped lift Hitler to his zenith. But it is these three, Goebbels, Goering, and Himmler, who, through lies, brutality, and terror, have translated the twisted dictator's vision into a horrifying reality. Working alone, Adolf Hitler could never have hoped to fulfill his dreams of conquest. Yet he now stands as master of the continent, propelled by his own madness and by the efforts of a failed author, a morphine addict, and a chicken farmer.